Desperate janitor saves bleeding crime boss's life. Days later, 20 black SUVs arrive, offering her everything she lost and a dangerous new family. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Take a deep breath, relax, and enjoy the story. The emergency room's fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed overhead, casting harsh, unforgiving shadows across Isabella Martinez's weathered features. At 32 years old, she looked a decade older, the kind of exhaustion that had settled deep into her bones, the kind that no amount of sleep could ever truly fix. Her calloused fingers, roughened from years of manual labor, trembled as she clutched the crumpled eviction notice she'd received that morning. 72 hours. That's all the time she had left before she and her 5-year-old daughter Maya would be homeless, living on the streets with nowhere to turn. "Mommy, my tummy hurts so bad," Maya whimpered from the hard plastic chair beside her, her small voice barely audible over the constant hum of vending machines and the anxious murmur of other waiting patients. Isabella's chest tightened with a pain that went beyond physical. The $8.37 in her worn leather wallet represented an impossible, soul-crushing choice: buy food for her starving daughter or keep enough bus fare to get to tomorrow's job interview, her third this week and possibly her last chance at employment. Poverty had a cruel, vicious way of making even the most basic decisions feel like impossible life-or-death gambles. "I know, sweetheart. Just a few more minutes, okay? I promise," Isabella murmured, pulling Maya closer against her side, trying to share what little warmth and comfort she had left to give. They sat in Memorial City Hospital's overcrowded waiting area, where Isabella worked the graveyard shift as a janitor, her last remaining source of income after losing her other 2 jobs in the past 6 weeks. Her ex-husband, Marcus, had vanished without a trace 16 months ago, leaving behind nothing but broken promises, unpaid bills, and a mountain of debt that threatened to bury them both. The unsigned divorce papers still sat on her kitchen counter, gathering dust, representing wounds that hadn't even begun to heal. The double doors at the end of the corridor suddenly exploded open with violent, startling urgency, and chaos erupted into the quiet desperation of the waiting room. "Move! Emergency! We need help immediately! Get a doctor now!" 5 men in expensive, immaculately tailored suits carried a 6th man between them, supporting his weight as his legs dragged limply. His pristine white designer shirt was soaked through with blood, stained deep crimson from a wound that was clearly serious. The injured man's face had gone deathly pale, almost grey, his breathing shallow and labored, each breath a struggle. Hospital staff rushed forward, their faces etched with concern. But the emergency room was operating beyond maximum capacity. A massive multi-car pileup on the interstate had filled every available bed, every examination room, every possible space. "I understand the urgency, but we have absolutely no open beds right now," a harried nurse explained, her voice straining to maintain professional composure despite the mounting chaos around them. "You'll have to wait like everyone else until—" "This man cannot wait another goddamn second." The tallest of the suited men moved forward aggressively, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the crisis unfolding around them, his dark eyes radiating barely controlled fury and something deeper, genuine terror. "Do you have any comprehension of who this man is? Do you understand what will happen if he dies?" Isabella watched from her corner seat, instinctively pulling Maya closer, recognizing the raw panic beneath their aggressive, threatening postures. She'd seen that exact expression before, in her own bathroom mirror during Maya's terrifying middle-of-the-night asthma attacks, in the haunted faces of neighbors who'd lost everything to poverty and despair. It was the unmistakable look of watching death circle someone you loved, of feeling completely powerless to stop it. The wounded man's eyes flickered open weakly, scanning the crowded waiting room with the hazy, unfocused awareness of someone desperately clinging to consciousness. His gaze drifted across frightened faces, past indifferent strangers, until it landed on Isabella. For one breathless, eternal moment, their eyes locked across the chaotic space. She saw past the obvious wealth, past the power that radiated from him even in his weakened state. She saw raw, primal fear, excruciating pain, and that desperate, fragile hope that anyone might be able to save him. "Mommy, why is that man all covered in red? Is he hurt?" Maya asked, her innocent question somehow piercing through all the tension and noise filling the room. Something broke open inside Isabella's heart, like a dam that had been holding back too much for far too long. She remembered her mother, Carmen, who'd worked as a paramedic for 15 years before terminal illness had claimed her just 4 years ago. Her mother had taught her, through words and actions, that healing transcended medical credentials and expensive degrees. It was fundamentally about recognizing shared humanity, about choosing compassion and action when terror and self-preservation whispered to turn away and save yourself. Isabella stood up on shaking legs, her worn-out body protesting, but her voice came out steady and clear. "I can help him." The suited men turned toward her in unison, this petite Latina woman in a faded janitor's uniform, holding a small child's hand, daring to speak up. Their expressions ranged from open skepticism to outright dismissal. But the silver-haired man, clearly their leader, studied her with sharp, calculating intelligence that seemed to see right through her. "You're a physician?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral, but suggesting he already knew the answer. "No, sir, but my mother was a paramedic for 15 years before she passed. She trained me extensively in emergency response procedures, how to control severe bleeding, how to stabilize trauma victims, how to recognize critical internal injuries, how to keep someone alive when seconds matter. I've kept people alive until ambulances arrived more times than I can count." It was the absolute truth, though Isabella had never listed those hard-earned skills on any job applications. In her neighborhood, emergency response times routinely stretched into hours rather than minutes, and knowing crisis management and basic field medicine had become an essential survival skill for anyone who cared about their community. The silver-haired man made his decision in mere seconds. "All right, show us what you can do." Isabella knelt beside the injured man on the cold tile floor, her hands moving with practiced, confident efficiency despite her pulse racing like a freight train. The wound was in his lower abdomen, a gunshot that had somehow miraculously missed major organs and arteries, but was bleeding heavily enough to be immediately life-threatening without proper intervention. She'd seen wounds like this before, the kind that killed you slowly if nobody knew what they were doing. "Maya, baby, I need you to be incredibly brave for me right now," Isabella said, her voice calm and soothing, despite her heart thundering in her chest. "Can you sit right over there against that wall and count to 100 for Mama? Count slowly and carefully." Maya nodded solemnly, her young face serious, understanding with that peculiar childhood wisdom that transcended her years that this moment genuinely mattered, that her mother needed her to be strong. Isabella turned to face the suited men with an authority she didn't know she possessed. "I need clean towels immediately, bottled water and the strongest alcohol you can find. Vodka, whiskey, anything over 80 proof. There's a supply closet down that corridor to the left. Bring me sterile gauze, medical tape, antiseptic solution if they have it, and latex gloves." "Move fast!" They moved without hesitation, without question. For the next 25 intense, focused minutes, Isabella Martinez became someone she hadn't realized existed somewhere deep within her. Her mother's voice echoed clearly through her consciousness, guiding her trembling hands as she cleaned the wound with careful precision, applied firm pressure to stem the dangerous bleeding, and improvised sophisticated field dressing that would hold the damaged tissue together until proper surgical care could be arranged. She worked with the focused, unwavering precision of someone who had nothing left to lose and absolutely everything to prove to herself and the world. The injured man's breathing gradually stabilized, becoming deeper and more regular. Color slowly returned to his ashen face, replacing the deathly gray pallor. When his eyes opened again, they held a clarity and focus that had been completely absent before. The fog of approaching death lifted. "You saved my life," he said, his voice rough and strained but undeniably strong. "What's your name?" "Isabella." "Isabella Martinez. I'm Dominic," he replied, and something significant in the way his companions visibly reacted to hearing his name made Isabella realize with sudden, Cold clarity that she'd just saved someone far more important, and undoubtedly far more dangerous, than she'd initially understood. Dominic Romano. The name held absolutely no meaning for Isabella, but the sudden, palpable shift in the room's atmosphere, the way everyone seemed to stand straighter, told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't just any wounded man. This was someone with tremendous power, extensive connections, and undoubtedly a very complicated, probably illegal relationship with the law. A doctor finally arrived, practically running, summoned by the suited men's relentless, aggressive insistence. He examined Dominic with clinical efficiency and professional expertise, his eyebrows rising higher and higher as he carefully assessed Isabella's improvised medical work. "This is genuinely exceptional field medicine," he said, genuine surprise and respect coloring his professional voice. "You undoubtedly saved his life. Another 15, maybe 20 minutes of blood loss and—" He let the grave implication hang unspoken in the air between them. Dominic reached out and grasped Isabella's hand firmly, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who'd been dying moments ago. "I owe you a debt. A life debt. In my world, in my family, that means absolutely everything." Isabella wanted to protest, to tell him that no debt was necessary, that she'd simply done what any decent, compassionate person would do when faced with someone dying. But looking directly into his intense, intelligent eyes, she understood instinctively that in his universe, debts carried enormous weight. Obligations were currency far more valuable than money, more binding than legal contracts. "I just did what needed doing," she said simply, honestly. "Mommy, I counted to 104 whole times," Maya announced proudly, suddenly appearing at Isabella's side with the bright, innocent pride of a child who'd accomplished something she believed was truly significant. Dominic's hardened gaze shifted to Maya, and something subtle but profound softened in his intimidating expression. "So you have a beautiful daughter. Thank you. She's my entire world, everything I have." The suited men gathered together, speaking in low, urgent, coded tones, efficiently arranging Dominic's immediate transport to what was clearly a private medical facility. The silver-haired man, who Isabella had overheard others calling Richard, approached her purposefully with a thick envelope. "For your services tonight," he said formally, pressing it firmly into her hands before she could even think to object or refuse. "Mr. Romano always honors his debts. Always." Isabella only opened the envelope much later after they'd all departed, after Dominic had been carefully transferred into a sleek black SUV with tinted windows, after the chaos and adrenaline had finally dissolved back into the hospital's normal, mundane rhythm. Inside was more money than she'd seen in her entire lifetime, $6,000 in pristine, crisp bills, accompanied by an elegant business card embossed with gold lettering, a phone number and a single, significant word, family. "Mommy, can we please eat now?" "I'm so hungry," Maya asked again, her small hand tugging insistently at Isabella's stained, blood-spattered uniform. Isabella looked down at her precious daughter, then at the money in her shaking hands, money that represented not merely survival, but genuine life-changing possibility. She thought about the eviction notice that had been crushing her spirit, about their completely empty refrigerator at home, about the relentless, grinding weight of poverty that had been slowly destroying her soul for so long. "Yes, baby," she whispered, tears streaming freely down her exhausted face. "We can eat now. We can eat whatever you want." 6 long days passed, and Isabella tried desperately to convince herself that the surreal night with Dominic Romano had actually happened, that it hadn't been some elaborate stress-induced hallucination. The money certainly proved real. She'd paid 3 months of back rent, filled her pantry with actual food, and even purchased Maya the new clothes and shoes she desperately needed. But everything else felt dreamlike and impossible, too strange and too perfectly timed to be genuine. She was mopping hospital corridors in the empty silence of 3 a.m. when her phone suddenly buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Come outside, now." Isabella's heart began racing uncontrollably. She made her way nervously to the main entrance, Maya sleeping peacefully in the staff break room, where Isabella's sympathetic supervisor had graciously allowed her to rest during the long overnight shifts. Through the thick glass doors, she saw something that literally stole her breath and made her knees weak. 20 black SUVs with tinted windows lined the entire street outside Memorial City Hospital, their powerful engines idling in perfect, intimidating synchronization. Men in dark, expensive suits stood at attention beside each vehicle, their military-precise posture radiating absolute discipline and undeniable authority. At the formation's exact center stood Dominic Romano himself, looking completely recovered and impossibly commanding in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit that probably cost more than Isabella made in 6 months. Isabella pushed through the heavy doors with trembling hands, her faded cleaning uniform suddenly feeling absurd and shameful in the presence of such obvious, overwhelming wealth and power. "Isabella Martinez," Dominic said, his deep voice carrying easily across the quiet, empty street. "I told you I always honor my debts." "You already paid me very generously," she replied, her voice steadier than her violently trembling hands suggested. "The money was more than I could have imagined. That was simple compensation for saving my life." "A transaction," Dominic said, his expression serious. "This," he gestured expansively toward the assembled vehicles and dozens of waiting men, "this is about something far more important and lasting. This is about family." Richard stepped forward smoothly, carrying an expensive leather portfolio. "Ms. Martinez, we've conducted extremely thorough research over the past week. We know about your eviction notice, which has been permanently resolved and your landlord compensated for the next year. We know about your ex-husband's complete failure to provide legally mandated child support, which our attorneys are currently addressing with considerable enthusiasm. We know about your precarious employment situation, your daughter's ongoing medical needs, and your late mother's unfulfilled dream of establishing a community clinic in the impoverished neighborhood where you grew up." Isabella felt genuinely dizzy, the world tilting. How could you possibly know all of this? "Because when Dominic Romano says he owes someone a life debt, we take that obligation with absolute, unwavering seriousness," Richard replied, his tone brooking no argument. "And during our investigation, we discovered something else, something perhaps more important. You're a natural healer, Ms. Martinez. You possess a genuine gift that absolutely should not be wasted, scrubbing hospital floors in the middle of the night." Dominic moved several steps closer, his expression intense but not threatening, radiating controlled power. "I lost my son 7 years ago. Leukemia. We had the finest oncologists, the most expensive experimental treatments, specialists flown in from around the world. Nothing made even the slightest difference. He was 8 years old when he died." His voice cracked noticeably, revealing the deep, unhealed grief he still carried. "Since that devastating day, I've dedicated myself completely to helping families who struggle the way mine did, families the system has abandoned. The substantial money we've accumulated through our various business ventures and enterprises. It funds medical clinics, pays for treatments that insurance denies, supports families who simply cannot afford proper care. Various business ventures," Isabella repeated carefully, understanding the careful euphemism perfectly well. "You're involved in organized crime. I prefer to describe us as a tightly knit family enterprise with unconventional methods and alternative revenue streams," Dominic replied with a slight, knowing smile. "But yes, Isabella, I won't insult your intelligence by deceiving you. My world is complex, morally ambiguous, and occasionally quite dangerous, which is precisely why I'm offering you a genuine choice, not issuing an ultimatum or making demands." Richard opened the impressive portfolio with practiced efficiency, revealing detailed documents and professional architectural plans. "We want to fund a comprehensive medical clinic in your neighborhood, your mother's neighborhood. A fully equipped facility where people who cannot afford traditional healthcare can receive quality treatment with dignity, respect, and absolutely no judgment. We want you to manage it, to make it real." Isabella stared in genuine disbelief at the detailed plans. A beautifully renovated building, state-of-the-art medical equipment, funded staff positions for qualified nurses, and compassionate physicians who genuinely cared about serving underserved communities. It was everything her mother had passionately dreamed of creating, before cancer had stolen her away. "Why me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm not a doctor. I'm not even certified or licensed. Because you saw a dying man and you didn't hesitate even 1 second," Dominic said with absolute conviction. "Because you possess both the practical skills and the compassionate heart to make a genuine, lasting difference. We'll send you to nursing school, full scholarship, all expenses completely covered, living stipend included. We'll provide comprehensive, proper training. But more importantly, we'll give you all the resources necessary to build something truly meaningful that will outlive all of us." "What's the catch?" "There's always a catch," Isabella said, years of hard experience making her cautious. "The catch is simply that you become part of our extended family," Dominic replied honestly. "Not the business operations. You'll never be asked to do anything illegal, immoral, or that compromises your principles. But the protective side, we take care of our own, Isabella. We protect our family fiercely, and anyone who helps our family, who saves one of us, becomes our family forever." Isabella thought about her mother's patient voice, all those lessons about healing and compassion, and seeing the humanity in everyone. She thought about Maya, currently sleeping in a break room because her mother couldn't afford proper childcare. She thought about the neighborhood where she'd grown up, where good people died regularly from easily treatable conditions simply because they couldn't afford to see a doctor or pay for medications. "I want to help people," she said finally, her voice growing stronger. "If you're genuinely giving me the means to do that, to make my mother's dream real, then yes, I accept your offer." The smile that gradually transformed Dominic's hardened face changed him from a powerful, intimidating crime boss into someone almost fatherly and warm. "Excellent. I was hoping you'd say that. Now there's another related matter we need to discuss. Your ex-husband, Marcus, what about him? He owes you 16 months of legally mandated child support, plus substantial compensation for abandonment and emotional damages. Our attorneys have located him in Arizona, living quite comfortably while you and his daughter struggle. He'll be paying every cent he owes with considerable interest, or he'll face some extremely uncomfortable, possibly painful conversations with people he definitely doesn't want to meet." Isabella knew she should have felt guilty about the powerful surge of satisfaction that rushed through her entire body. But she'd spent too many nights crying alone over unpaid bills, too many days watching Maya go without necessities, because Marcus had selfishly chosen his own comfort over his responsibilities as a father. Justice, even delivered through questionable means, still felt like justice. "Thank you," she said quietly, meaning it completely. Over the following 4 transformative months, Isabella's entire life changed in ways that felt simultaneously miraculous and surreal. The clinic, named Carmen's Light after her beloved mother, officially opened in a completely renovated building that had once been an abandoned, decaying factory. Dominic's extensive organization had funded absolutely everything: cutting-edge medical equipment, competitive staff salaries, comprehensive insurance, a revolutionary program providing completely free healthcare to anyone in the neighborhood who needed it, regardless of citizenship status or ability to pay. Isabella enrolled in an intensive, accelerated nursing program, studying during daylight hours, while Maya attended an excellent private preschool that Dominic's family also quietly funded. The initially intimidating suited men became familiar, trusted, almost beloved faces. Richard brought Maya thoughtful gifts every week and treated her like a cherished granddaughter, while others assisted with everything from security to complex administrative logistics to navigating bureaucratic obstacles. But it was Dominic's consistent weekly visits that meant the most to Isabella. He would arrive every Thursday afternoon without fail, bringing fresh flowers for the clinic and expensive pastries for the hard-working staff. He'd speak genuinely with patients, learn their stories, remember their names, and invariably discover ways to help beyond what even the well-funded clinic could provide. Stable employment opportunities would mysteriously appear for unemployed fathers. Scholarship applications would be approved for academically deserving students. Problems that had seemed completely insurmountable would suddenly, inexplicably resolved themselves. "You remind me so much of my son," Dominic told Isabella one quiet afternoon. Watching her expertly treat a young child with an asthma attack, remarkably similar to Maya's chronic condition. "He had your natural compassion, your stubborn refusal to abandon people, even when it cost you something." "I wish I could have known him," Isabella replied softly, genuine sadness in her voice. "He would have admired you tremendously. He always believed that the best people were those who helped others, even when it cost them everything." When they had nothing to gain, the clinic flourished beyond anyone's expectations, rapidly becoming a genuine beacon of hope in a neighborhood that had been systematically forgotten and abandoned by the rest of the city. Word spread quickly about the remarkable place where people could receive quality health care regardless of their ability to pay, where staff treated everyone with dignity and respect, where healing extended far beyond just treating physical ailments. Maya blossomed beautifully in the new, stable environment, no longer the anxious, worried child who'd watched her mother struggle and break down. She had stability, security, good food, and a large chosen family that included dozens of suited men who taught her to be strong, confident, and genuinely fearless. One peaceful evening, exactly 7 months after that fateful night in the hospital, Isabella stood in the clinic's crowded waiting room, watching patients receive care. An elderly man gratefully getting his diabetes medication, a construction worker having his badly injured shoulder properly treated, a frightened pregnant teenager receiving comprehensive prenatal care without judgment, shame, or condemnation. This was her mother's lifelong dream, realized through the most unexpected, unlikely circumstances imaginable. A life debt paid by a dying crime boss had created powerful ripples of healing extending far beyond a single night's emergency, touching hundreds of lives. Dominic appeared quietly beside her, his presence now as familiar and comforting as actual family. "Any regrets?" "None whatsoever," Isabella said with complete honesty. "I thought helping you that night was the end of something. The last decent act I'd managed before poverty consumed me completely. But it was actually a beginning. Life debts work in both directions," Dominic replied thoughtfully. "You saved my life, gave me more time, but you also reminded me why I survived, why I kept fighting after losing my son, because there are still genuinely good people in this world worth protecting, worth empowering, worth building something lasting for." Richard approached purposefully with a young woman Isabella didn't recognize. She appeared to be in her late 20s, impeccably well-dressed, and carried herself with the unconscious confidence of inherited wealth and privilege. "Ms. Martinez, I'd like you to meet someone very important," Dominic said, his voice thick with genuine emotion. "This is Gabriella Romano, my brother's daughter, my niece." Gabriella stepped forward, tears shining visibly in her eyes. "You saved my uncle's life. Our entire family owes you far more than we can ever possibly repay. But we want to try." She handed Isabella a heavy envelope. Inside was a complete property deed to the building housing Carmen's Light, signed over entirely to Isabella's name. No conditions attached, no strings, no obligations. Just a gift from a grateful family. "I can't accept this," Isabella protested, overwhelmed. "It's far, far too much. You already accepted it 7 months ago when you chose compassion over fear, action over paralysis," Dominic replied gently. "Everything that's followed has simply been the universe balancing its accounts." That night, after the clinic finally closed, and Maya was sleeping peacefully in their new, safe apartment, Isabella stood on the building's roof, looking out over the neighborhood that had raised her. The streets that had once seemed so hopeless and forgotten now felt filled with genuine possibility. The vicious cycle of poverty that had seemed completely unbreakable had been interrupted by the most unlikely intervention imaginable. She thought about the man she'd saved, about the family she'd gained, about the debt that had transformed into profound blessing. And she understood something her mother had tried to teach her all those years ago. Healing wasn't just about medicine, or money, or opportunity. It was about recognizing the divine spark of humanity in every single person, about choosing connection over isolation, about believing that even in the darkest moments, Compassion and courage could create genuine miracles. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. Thursday afternoon. Don't forget, the family needs its healer. Isabella smiled, typing a simple response. I'll be there. Family takes care of family, always. Below her, the lights of Carmen's light glowed warmly in the darkness, a lighthouse of healing in a neighborhood that had waited far too long for hope. And somewhere in the city, a former crime boss smiled, knowing that saving one desperate mother had become the best decision he'd never planned to make. The story had begun with a woman at the absolute end of her rope, facing eviction and crushing despair. But it had become something much larger, a testament to the truth that sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back, that family isn't always about blood, and that the smallest acts of courage can ripple outward in ways that transform entire communities. Isabella Martinez had saved Dominic Romano's life that chaotic night in the hospital waiting room. But in the months that followed, he had given her something equally precious: purpose, security, and the means to heal not just individuals, but an entire community wounded by poverty and systematic neglect. In the end, that was the true meaning of family, not the one you were born into, but the one you chose to build through loyalty and compassion, that everyone deserves a chance.